God is it's a principle. God is a force of nature, and it's a principle. It's not some highly cultivated, very sophisticated human being. That's not what God is. God is an impulse in the cosmos. Is a creative impulse in the cosmos, not a person. So the God principle is not reasonable, right? The lower forms or expressions of the creative impulse or evolutionary impulse are also unreasonable. When you experience the sexual impulse, which is the lowest biological expression of the creative impulse, is it reasonable? Is the sexual impulse or the biological command to procreate experiences of sexual impulse, is it reasonable? No. It's very unreasonable, isn't it? So the creative impulse experienced at the biological level is absolutely unreasonable, isn't it? Huh? There's no reason to, please, let's be reasonable. And when you meet was Gandhi being reasonable when he said, let's all lie down and get run over by cars and guns and whatever? Let's just sit down in the street and let them blow us away. Is that a reasonable thing to do? Are you crazy? Is that reasonable? Was Martin Luther King being reasonable when he said, let's just sit down at those counters and let those white people, beat us to death? Was that a reasonable thing to do? Not really. But because, for example, they were inspired, you see, by an unreasonable impulse to evolve, right? The impulse to evolve is not reasonable, is it? See my point? So there was what some people are, well, this is very unreasonable. Well, it depends on whose point of view. Was the way the Martin Luther King or the Gandhi was insisting on making this change, was it unreasonable from the perspective of the evolutionary inspiration, or was it unreasonable from the perspective of this colonial mentality in India, or this kind of racist, fascist mentality, in the southern states of America? Huh? Take your pick. So it wasn't unreasonable from the perspective of the urge to evolve, was it? No. No. Right? You with me? It wasn't at all unreasonable. But who was it unreasonable to? Those parts of colonial culture and lower levels of American culture that didn't want to move forward. They said, that's very unreasonable, right? So the evolutionary impulse is always unreasonable. Is it reasonable for an inspired scientist to stay up for a week and not sleep because he's, I got to get it. Come on, it's crazy. You haven't eaten or slept for days. It doesn't matter. Huh? But what if he found a cure for cancer? Or found, the secret to, 0-point energy, infinite energy, whatever, oh, now we can solve all our problems. Would it have been worth it? Huh? Yes. Yes. Was it reasonable? Reasonable. I think you should get some sleep. Take it easy. So but my point here is that the evolutionary impulse, or the God impulse, is not reasonable according to your definition of what reasonable is. See my point? Okay. So in the same way, when you get to the spiritual level of it, which is the urge to become conscious, when you experience the urge to become conscious passionately, right, like I do, a lot of people think, that's unreasonable. Well, compared to who? You see? Because the evolutionary impulse is always the urge to move forward, to take a leap forward. You see, to take a leap forward. You get the point? To take a leap forward. So you have to understand that the urge to evolve from lower to higher, remember I said it's a vertical axis? The impulse to emerge from lower to higher, is always going to be experienced by the part of yourself, right, that's not the spiritual impulse, as unreasonable. I just want everybody to understand it's an impersonal fact. It's the nature of the authentic self. It's the nature of the evolutionary impulse. It's inherently unreasonable from the perspective of the part of yourself that doesn't want to change. So from the perspective of evolutionary enlightenment, the individual and collective ego or narcissism, the values that come from our cultural history that we've taken with us, will always find the impulse to evolve at the highest, deepest level. That's unreasonable. See my point? But I want you to see the absolutely radically impersonal nature of the forces at work here.